Hey, listen up. Imagine a world where the mere mention of Vikings sent shivers down the spine of entire kingdoms. These fierce warriors from the north were seen as unstoppable, their longships slicing through rivers and seas, bringing terror wherever they landed. For centuries, stories of their brutal raids painted them as invincible. But what if I told you that the Vikings weren't always the terrifying force of legend? What if I told you there were moments in history when they were not just beaten, but completely humiliated on the battlefield? Buckle up, because we're diving into the incredible true stories of the four enemies who brought the mighty Vikings to their knees. Let's set the stage. The Vikings, hailing from Scandinavia, were masters of the sea during the 8th to 11th centuries. Their lightning-fast raids struck fear into the hearts of people across Europe. They pillaged villages, besieged cities, and forced kings to pay massive tributes just to avoid total destruction. Their reputation grew so fierce that many believed nothing could stand in their way. But history tells a different story. Behind the tales of their conquests, there are lesser-known chapters of defeat, episodes where the Vikings faced organized, determined enemies who turned the tables on them. These weren't just losses. They were crushing blows that shattered the myth of Viking invincibility. So, let's explore these moments of humiliation and see how the so-called sea wolves were tamed by those who dared to fight back. Our first stop takes us to the heart of Europe, to the Frankish Kingdom in the 9th century. At this time, the Vikings were at the peak of their power. The rivers of Europe were like open highways for their longships, allowing them to strike deep into enemy territory with ease. Towns and villages stood defenseless against their attacks. Paris itself was besieged, and the Frankish kings were forced to pay huge sums, tributes worth thousands of dollars in today's money, just to keep the invaders at bay. It seemed like no one could stop them. A handful of Viking warriors could bring an entire kingdom to its knees. But in the year 881, everything changed. A bold Viking force ventured too far into Frankish lands, confident they could raid without consequence. They were wrong. At the Battle of Saucourt-en-Vimeu, they faced a young king named Louis III, who had had enough of the Norse terror. Louis gathered a determined army, ready to end the Viking threat once and for all. What happened next stunned all of Europe. According to historical records like the Frankish Annals, the Vikings didn't just lose, they were utterly destroyed. Thousands of Norse warriors fell in battle, their numbers decimated with a ferocity no one expected. The defeat was so devastating that Viking raids in the region halted for years. This wasn't just a setback, it was a public humiliation for a people who were thought to be unbeatable. The Franks, who had once trembled at the sight of Viking sails, now celebrated a victory that felt like divine justice. A Latin poem written shortly after the battle even praised King Louis as God's chosen warrior sent to punish the Norsemen for their arrogance. What made this battle so significant wasn't just the sheer number of Viking casualties, but how it exposed their weaknesses. The Vikings were incredible raiders, striking fast and disappearing before anyone could fight back. But when faced with a well-organized army, their lack of structure became their downfall. The Franks had heavy cavalry, disciplined infantry, and a unified command, things the Vikings, who often fought in small, independent bands, simply didn't have. At Saucourt-en-Vimeu, their overconfidence led them straight into a trap. They pushed too far inland, away from their ships, and paid the ultimate price. For the people of the time, this sent a powerful message: the Vikings could be beaten. European rulers realized they didn't have to keep paying tributes. With preparation and determination, even the fiercest invaders could be stopped. The myth of Viking invincibility had been cracked wide open. But the Franks weren't the only ones to humble the Vikings. Let's travel south to the Iberian Peninsula, where another crushing defeat awaited the Norse warriors. In the year 844, a massive Viking fleet appeared off the coast of Al-Andalus, the Muslim-ruled region of modern-day Spain. Their target was Seville, a wealthy and glittering city under the control of the Emirate of Cordoba. At first, the Vikings had success. They managed to capture parts of the city and caused widespread destruction, just as they had done so many times before. It looked like another easy victory for the men from the north. But they underestimated their opponent. Emir Abd al-Rahman II didn't sit idly by. He quickly assembled a large army, complete with skilled cavalry and archers, and launched a fierce counterattack. According to Arab chronicles, the Vikings were completely overwhelmed. Their beloved longships, the very symbol of their power, were set ablaze on the Guadalquivir River. Hundreds of Viking warriors were taken prisoner and publicly executed as a warning to others. This wasn't just a military loss, it was a deep humiliation. The Vikings, who saw themselves as unstoppable predators, became the prey. The defeat was so severe that for decades afterward, they barely dared to return to the region. The memory of the disaster in Seville lingered as a stark reminder that even the mightiest raiders could be brought low. In Al-Andalus, the Vikings learned a hard lesson. Not every land would bow to their will. Now, let's shift our focus to the British Isles, where the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms also dealt a major blow to Viking pride. By the late 9th century, much of England was under Viking control in an area known as the Danelaw, where Scandinavian laws and customs ruled. The Anglo-Saxons seemed to be fighting a losing battle, constantly pushed back by wave after wave of Viking raids. But in 878, everything changed at the Battle of Edington. Alfred of Wessex, who would later be known as Alfred the Great, rallied his people after years of desperate resistance. He faced a powerful Viking army led by a warlord named Guthrum. The battle was intense, but for the first time, an Anglo-Saxon force defeated the Vikings in open combat. This wasn't just a victory, it was a turning point. The defeat was so crushing that Guthrum had no choice but to surrender on Alfred's terms. And here's where the humiliation truly stung. As part of the peace agreement, Guthrum agreed to be baptized as a Christian, a symbolic act that carried immense weight. Imagine a fierce Viking leader, who had spent years trying to conquer and dominate, now kneeling before a Christian priest, accepting the faith of the very people he sought to destroy. For the Anglo-Saxons, this was more than a military triumph. It was a cultural and spiritual victory, a moment that stripped the Vikings of their aura of dominance. The image of an untouchable warrior was shattered as Guthrum bowed to the authority of Alfred's god. But these three defeats, by the Franks, the Muslims of Al-Andalus, and the Anglo-Saxons, weren't the only times the Vikings were humbled. Let's look at one final example, this time from the east, where the Byzantine Empire also proved that the Norse weren't invincible. The Byzantines, rulers of a vast and sophisticated empire centered in Constantinople, were no strangers to invaders. In the early 10th century, Viking warriors, often called Varangians in this region, attempted to raid the wealthy Byzantine lands. But they quickly learned that the empire was unlike any enemy they had faced before. The Byzantines were masters of strategy, with a powerful navy and advanced weaponry, including the infamous Greek fire, a flammable liquid that could burn even on water. In one notable encounter around 941, a Viking fleet led by Igor of Kiev attacked Byzantine territories near the Black Sea. They were confident, expecting the same easy plunder they had found elsewhere. But the Byzantines were ready. Using their superior tactics and technology, they obliterated the Viking ships. Greek fire rained down on the invaders, turning their longships into floating infernos. The defeat was catastrophic. Survivors were captured, and the Byzantines made sure the message was clear. Their empire was not to be trifled with. For the Vikings, who prided themselves on their seafaring skills, losing so decisively at sea was a bitter pill to swallow. Once again, their reputation took a massive hit. So, what do these 4 defeats, at Saucourt-en-Vimeu, Seville, Edington, and against the Byzantines, tell us about the Vikings? First, they show that while the Norse were incredible warriors, they weren't gods. Their strength lay in speed, surprise, and ferocity. But when faced with disciplined armies, superior tactics, or advanced technology, they could be stopped. The Franks used organization and heavy cavalry to crush them on land. The Muslims of Al-Andalus showed that swift counterattacks could turn the tide. The Anglo-Saxons proved that determination and leadership could win the day, even against a seemingly unstoppable foe. And the Byzantines demonstrated that innovation and naval power could outmatch even the best Viking longships. These moments of humiliation didn't end the Viking Age, of course. The Norse continued to raid, trade, and explore for centuries, leaving an indelible mark on history. They traveled as far as North America, long before Columbus, and their influence can still be seen in the languages, cultures, and even DNA of many European regions. But these defeats remind us that history isn't just a story of winners. Even the most feared warriors had their weaknesses, and their enemies knew how to exploit them. The Vikings weren't invincible monsters. They were human, capable of being outsmarted, outfought, and outlasted. Let's also consider the broader impact of these losses. Each defeat sent ripples through the medieval world. Rulers who once lived in fear of Viking raids began to see a path forward. Fortifications were built, armies were trained, and strategies were developed to counter the Norse threat. In a way, these humiliations forced the Vikings to adapt as well. Over time, many of them settled in the lands they once raided, integrating with local populations, and even adopting Christianity. The fierce raiders of legend became farmers, traders, and eventually, part of the very societies they had once terrorized. As we wrap up this journey through history, let's reflect on what these stories mean for us today. The Vikings are often romanticized as larger-than-life figures, symbols of strength and adventure. But their defeats remind us that no one is unbeatable. Whether it's a person, a group, or even an idea, there's always a way to challenge and overcome what seems impossible. The Franks, the Muslims, the Anglo-Saxons, and the Byzantines didn't just fight back. They showed the world that courage, preparation, and unity can change the course of history. So, the next time you hear a tale of Viking glory, remember the other side of the story. Remember the enemies who stood their ground and turned the tide against the Northmen. History, after all, is never as simple as it seems.